Europa, the region the world has long considered the most advanced and best prepared for anything, was just scorched by a heat wave that pushed temperatures in Spain to 48 degrees Celsius and France to 44 degrees. And if you did not know, more than 1,000 people died in France alone in just 4 days. And this happened because 80% of homes in Europe were built centuries ago to trap warmth, not survive heat, with no air conditioning whatsoever. And what makes this even more shocking is that France's nuclear reactors, which supply 70% of the country's electricity, were forced to shut down because the river water used to cool them had become too hot. And what frustrates me the most is that while people were literally dying, politicians were busy debating environmental ideology instead of saving lives. So if the most advanced nations on Earth can be paralyzed in just 4 days, what exactly is going to happen to developing countries that are far more vulnerable than them? We break down everything in this video, so stay with us until the end. 48 degrees Celsius. In Spain, in Europe, not in the Sahara Desert, not in the Middle East, in Europe, the continent that has long since been the symbol of human civilization's progress. And what makes it even harder to accept is that this number is not some strange local record, but part of a heat wave that devastated almost all of Western Europe at the same time. France reached 44 degrees, and in just 4 days, more than 1,000 people died in France alone. 1,000 people in 4 days. That means 250 people died every single day, a figure that exceeds many major natural disasters we know of. And these were not only elderly or frail victims. Many were young people who drowned while trying to cool themselves in rivers and lakes without supervision because there was nowhere else they could go. Dying in conditions like that is genuinely heartbreaking. The trigger was a phenomenon called an omega block, or heat dome, an atmospheric pattern that traps hot air from North Africa above Europe with nowhere to go. Imagine scorching air locked inside a giant bowl above an entire continent, growing more concentrated, growing hotter, going nowhere. And at the same time, marine heat waves around the waters surrounding Europe made conditions even worse because the sea that normally acts as a natural coolant was instead becoming an additional heat source. The WHO has been saying this for a long time. Heat waves are the deadliest natural disaster in Europe, more deadly than floods, more deadly than earthquakes. Scientific reports about the threat of extreme European heat waves actually existed since the 1990s, but according to many analysts, they never became a policy priority because they did not benefit certain industries with significant influence in the European Parliament. So the question is, if scientists predicted this decades ago, how could the wealthiest nations on Earth still be hit this hard?
This is what genuinely surprised me. All this time, we assumed Europe was advanced. World-class infrastructure, organized systems. If a disaster strikes, they would be the most prepared. But this heat wave proved the opposite in brutal fashion. Railway tracks in Germany warped and buckled from the heat. Mass transportation was massively disrupted in the middle of an emergency. And most staggeringly, French nuclear power plants were forced to temporarily shut down because the river water used to cool their reactors had become too hot to use. Think about that. River water too hot to cool a nuclear reactor. This felt like a scene from a science fiction film becoming reality. And these nuclear plants supply 70% of France's national electricity. So once they shut down, France was forced to import electricity from neighboring countries that were simultaneously experiencing the same crisis. In Italy, mass power outages occurred because the surge in air conditioning use overloaded the entire system. And the fact that is most staggering is this: 80% of homes in Europe do not have air conditioning. 80%! Because those homes were designed hundreds of years ago to retain warmth and trap heat inside, not to expel heat outward. A system perfectly suited for Europe's long, cold winters, but a deadly trap when temperatures exceed 44 degrees. And what makes me even more frustrated is that this is not the first time this has happened. The 2003 heat wave killed 70,000 people in Europe. 70,000! That was around 20 years earlier. And after all of that, the infrastructure still did not change much. Tokyo and Singapore, both far hotter than Europe, have public cooling systems, modern insulated buildings, and trained heat emergency responses. Europe, which is wealthier and supposedly more advanced, is far behind.
Now, this is what I find the most infuriating about this entire heat wave drama. In France, while temperatures hit 44 degrees and people were dying, what was happening on the political stage was not coordinated rescue efforts, not a coordinated national emergency declaration, but an ideological debate between the right wing and the left wing about air conditioning. People were dying, and politicians were debating air conditioning. The right wing demanded immediate mass air conditioning procurement. Their reasoning was simple and humane: save lives now, deal with the long term later. The left wing strongly rejected mass air conditioning. Their argument also had logic behind it. Air conditioning consumes enormous energy, expels heat outside that makes outdoor temperatures even hotter, and in the long term actually accelerates climate change that makes the next heat wave even worse. While that debate was running warmly in Parliament and across the media, people outside kept dying in heat that had no debate about it. And the data on air conditioning genuinely creates a dilemma. Air conditioning globally already contributes 8% of the world's carbon emissions. 8%! And the International Energy Agency projects global air conditioning demand will triple by 2050, meaning its emission contribution will explode. The more air conditioning is installed, the hotter the world gets, the more air conditioning is needed again. A feedback loop with no end and no winner. But the theory I find most interesting about this debate is about who actually benefits from all this drama. The air conditioning industry needs Europe to adopt air conditioning on a massive scale, a market worth hundreds of billions of euros that has been nearly closed to them until now. The renewable energy industry needs this crisis framed as strong evidence of the urgent need for energy transition, so their project contracts increase. And the people dying in the middle of it all, they have no voice in this debate.
Now, let us get into the science, which I find the most chilling part of all. Data has confirmed one fact that can no longer be disputed. Europe is warming twice as fast as the global warming average. Twice! Not slightly faster, but twice as fast as the global average. And the effect is not just about rising temperatures. The frequency is what I cannot stop thinking about. Extreme heat waves that used to occur twice in 25 years now occur 10 times, 5 times more frequently. This is no longer an anomaly. This has become a new permanent pattern. Why is Europe warming this fast? There are two major factors that are compounding each other. First, the Arctic is melting 4 times faster than the global average. This melting is disrupting the jet stream, the cold air current that has long functioned like a natural air conditioner, keeping Europe's climate stable. Once the jet stream is disrupted, hot air from North Africa can enter Europe with nothing to stop it. Second, marine heat waves in the waters surrounding Europe are turning the sea, which should be a natural coolant, into an additional heat source instead. And there is what scientists call a feedback loop that is making the situation increasingly uncontrollable. The hotter Europe gets, the more air conditioning is installed, the more carbon emissions are produced. The hotter Europe gets, the more air conditioning is needed again. A cycle that keeps spinning with no natural break. The projections for 2050 are even more alarming. Temperatures in southern Europe could regularly reach 50 degrees Celsius in summer. 50 degrees routinely. And what makes me suspicious is that this data has been known since 2010, but according to some independent scientists, it has never become the main agenda at COP climate conferences because European nations themselves have been the most reluctant to commit to drastic emission reductions. They speak the loudest about climate at global forums, yet their historical emissions from the Industrial Revolution era are the largest contributors to the very crisis they are now experiencing themselves. The irony is genuinely infuriating.
And now the biggest question, is this just the beginning or have we already reached the peak? Let me give you some numbers I think need to be remembered carefully. The frequency of extreme European heat waves has already risen from twice per 25 years to 10 times, and with a warming rate twice the global average, this trend will not stop. Nuclear plants being shut down means Europe faces an energy crisis in the middle of summer. Electricity prices spike dramatically, and this connects directly to production costs, logistics costs, and ultimately the prices of goods we buy here in Indonesia. The impact reaches us too, even from across the continent. And there is a major social shift already happening in Europe now that rarely gets media attention: climate migration. Residents of southern Europe are beginning to move northward to avoid extreme heat. This is not a future projection, this is already happening now. And globally, climate migration is projected to produce 216 million internal refugees by 2050. 216 million, the largest in human history. But the most important thing for us to realize is that African and South Asian nations that are far poorer and far hotter than Europe are the most vulnerable of all. If Europe, which is wealthy, whose infrastructure is advanced, whose systems are organized, can be overwhelmed like this in just 4 days, imagine what will happen in developing nations that stand on the front lines of climate change impact but have the least resources to adapt. And the same heat wave that devastated Europe also devastated global wheat harvests. Global food prices rose as a result. And we, living in the tropics that have always been hot, need to start asking ourselves, have we begun preparing for this, or are we still waiting for the crisis to reach us first before we start moving? Write your thoughts in the comments.